was a former slave who had gained freedom from his master. You know how hard that was to do in 1770? There weren't any free slaves around at that time. And he had gained freedom from his master, was a free black man in colonial America, and lost his life in this Boston Massacre. Well, it's always kind of funny. Yeah, my dear?
So was Crispus Attucks, was he kind of able to go do what
Yeah.
do in the colonies?
Yeah.
He was able to join some rebellion?
Could have done whatever you want.
Really?
Yeah, which is very unusual in the 17th century.
Yeah.
That's what the sad was. That's why you bring up sad that he was killed, right? Well, as you can imagine, the people of Boston were pretty angry about this massacre. I always find it kind of interesting, and I'll give you a prelude when we get into the Indian Wars. It always seemed like when the cavalry, the military, was fighting the Indians in the 1860s and 70s, that whenever the soldiers would kill a mass amount of women and children, it was always a victory. Whenever the Indians would kill a massive amount of soldiers, it was always a massacre, because of the way it was written up in the media even then. Indians didn't have any media, right? So it was okay for white soldiers to kill women and children of Native Americans and whatever. That was a victory in battle. But I'll tell you, if the Indians ever got even and worked over the white soldiers, it was always a massacre. Well, this Boston Massacre is speaking on the terms of who? Who made up that name? The Loyalists or the Patriots? Well, the Loyalists wouldn't, because the Patriots did, because they're the ones that were killed. And what particular group in general gave it the name Massachusetts from the Patriots? Sons of Liberty. So the Sons of Liberty named this event in American history the Boston Massacre. And they saw it as a massacre because patriots were killed. Now, Jordan, if you were a citizen of Boston and a patriot, after these events I just talked about, what might be one thing you might demand from the British government? Okay, you've witnessed this Boston Massacre, where British soldiers have shot and killed American colonists. You're an American colonist. What might you demand from the British government? Don't be so soft, man. You're pissed off, right? You're mad. What are you demanding from them? Mackenzie, what would you demand from them? You kind of like Christopher Attucks. What would you demand from the British government? Come on! Well, kind of. Wolf? Justin?
For the British.
That's not Justin, is it? It was Dylan. Now, if I do that one more time, we start putting it on the board. Dylan, what might you ask from the British government?
We go back to Great Britain.
What? You're close. What group needs to go back to Great Britain and leave us alone? Who's there?
Loyalists.
No? Soldiers. First thing they demanded is that all British soldiers be taken out of Boston. Look what happened with the soldiers here. But come on, get a little tough here. What else would you demand? They did right. That's the first thing they demanded, is British soldiers be taken out of Boston. You have it, dear?
Well, if they take out soldiers, maybe it would lessen attacks since they don't have to do the quartering attacks.
Well, maybe. Well, we're going to talk about that. That's a good point. We're going to talk about that. What else would you be mad about? What would you want, Luke?
That they walked away free.
Who did?
The soldiers that
Well, yeah, are you gonna want those soldiers that killed those colonists tried? Well, sure you are. So those were the two demands. The Patriots of Massachusetts made two demands upon the British government. Number one, they demanded that all British troops be withdrawn from the city of Boston. And two, they demanded that those British soldiers that were responsible for the deaths of the 5 men would be put on trial for murder. Wouldn't you want that? Well, sure you would. But what is those 5 guys going to have, Miss Warner, to be fair? What do you got to get them? Oh, come on. If you get a speeding ticket unwarranted, you tell your dad I was going 30 and they ticketed me for 50, what's he going to get for you to defend you? A lawyer. These guys are going to get a lawyer. Are they going to bring a lawyer in from Great Britain across the ocean? No, they're going to hire, believe it or not, a patriot lawyer to defend these soldiers. And you know what his name is?
John Adams.
John Adams. who will be eventually your second president of the United States. Now, would you think first in your mind, Adriana, that the deck might be stacked against these soldiers if you've got a patriot lawyer defending them? Well, that was the great thing about John Adams. Even though he felt no sympathy for any of these British soldiers, he believed through his integrity as a lawyer, they all deserved a what? Fair trial. So he defended them. And the jury were all loyalists. Now think about that oxymoron when you think about this trial. You got 8 British soldiers going on trial for murder. 8. They're defended by a patriot lawyer, right? And the jury is all loyalists. Okay? Well, to make a long story short, although John Adams did not have any sympathy for these accused British soldiers, these 8, he believed they were entitled to a fair trial, and the hand-picked loyalist jury acquitted 6 of the 8 soldiers. What does acquitted mean? Caleb?
Not guilty.
Not guilty. They acquitted them. 6 of the 8 were acquitted. And what was the reason they were acquitted? Because they acted in self-defense. However, 2 were not. Hugh Montgomery, this guy right here, and Matthew Kilroy were convicted of manslaughter, which is less than murder. Okay? So, 6 were acquitted, 2 were found guilty of manslaughter, which is a lesser offense than murder. Hugh Montgomery and Matthew Kilroy, K-I-L-R-O-Y, were convicted of manslaughter. Yes?
What's the difference between manslaughter?
Murder, go ahead.
Okay, so murder, it could be premeditated or in the moment, while manslaughter is more like, let's say it's like stabbing someone over, running them over with a vehicle. There's a different offense
Right.
for that.
You have
Or
malice,
yeah.
right? Malice. So,
There's hatred between murder, while manslaughter could be accidental.
or self-defense,
Yeah.
kind of. You're exactly right. Very good, Aisha. So if I stabbed you in the heart, that's murder. Okay? If I was stabbing it at Maddie and hit you by accident and killed you, that would be manslaughter. Because my intent wasn't to hurt you, it was to hurt her. Okay? All right, now, they were convicted. Guess what their sentence was? And this was very common punishment in colonial times.
Hanging?
Nope,
Beheaded.
nope,
Dog?
what?
Dog?
Nope. They
Feather-
branded their thumbs,
Oh, that's.
which is a very painful thing to have done to you. They branded their thumbs, which was a very common, severe punishment in colonial times if you did something wrong. They branded their thumbs. Now, I'll give you another prelude, Luke Mortimer. We talk about the Civil War. What do you think they did to members of the military on the northern side if they ran from battle, showed cowardice? What did they do to them? Or ran away before they ever went into battle? You know what? You ever heard of George Armstrong Custer? Lost at the Little Bighorn? When people deserted or were cowards, he just shot them. And he didn't shoot them to kill them, he shot them to bring them back and suffer. And he got kind of in trouble for that. But he didn't have many deserters, I'll tell you. But what was the common practice in the Civil War if you were found to be a coward? They branded a C on your cheek, which would be there for life, obviously, and be very painful. They branded a C on your cheek. That's painful. I don't know if you ever been branded, any of you? You ever had your finger burnt or your hand burnt? Well, take about 10 times that. That's what branding is. Yeah.
Would they brand anything on their thumbs, or was it?
I think just branded them with an iron. Nothing, no particular thing. Yeah, it was very painful.
Why versus hanging or stone or
I don't know. That was common punishment in the colonial times. Who knows? Very painful in those days. Okay, now, this is kind of interesting because I want to go back. Could any of the dead speak on what they thought? Could you get the opinion of Crispus Attucks on whether he thought the British soldiers shot him in self-defense or not? Who could you get an opinion from maybe though? No? How would you know? No? You're talking about the guys that died. Talk to one of them before they died, right? This is a weird story. But one of the 2 that were mortally wounded was Patrick Carr. And as he was dying, they asked him if he thought the soldiers acted in self-defense. Because they wanted to find out. Because they knew this was going to be a big deal. So as this man was dying, what was his name? Patrick Carr. Someone leaned down and asked him, as he was dying, if he thought the British soldiers acted in self-defense. Now, I'm going to read to you his response. I don't want you to write it down. Just want you to listen to it and tell me what you think, okay? This was Patrick Carr's response as he lay mortally wounded, dying, when asked if he thought the British soldiers acted in self-defense in shooting him. He said, quote, "I heard many voices cry out to kill the soldiers," adding, quote, that he did not blame the man, whoever he was, that had shot him. What's he saying? He thinks he shot him in probably self-defense. You think that was used in the trial? It surely was. You think that was part of John Adams' defense that maybe got the 6 off anyway? Sure it was. Okay? So Patrick Carr, one of the colonists that was mortally wounded, was asked as he lay dying if he thought the soldiers acted in self-defense. His result, "I heard many voices cry out to kill the soldiers." He added that he did not blame the man, whoever he was, that had shot him. Okay? Now, let's think about this. Here are your first casualties of the American Revolution, really, right? Who's your first casualty of the American Revolution? Christopher Cider. Who's your second casualty? Crispus Attucks. Who's your third casualty that you know of? Patrick Carr and 2 others, right? Okay? So anyway, just keep that in mind. Those guys become the first casualties in this struggle for colonial freedom from Great Britain. Okay? All right, that's going to take us to our last subtopic of the day. The British repeal the Townshend Acts. The British repeal the Townshend Acts. Now, in 1770, Great Britain's Parliament is going to get yet another new Prime Minister to replace Charles Townshend. And his name will be Lord Frederick North. Lord Frederick North will now become the new Prime Minister of Great Britain in 1770. And as Lord Frederick North takes over the government of Great Britain, he can see firsthand this gap between the American colonies and Great Britain getting what? Wider and wider and wider. And he sees that as dangerous. And so he goes to Parliament and he said, you know what? This is getting bad. I think we need to consider repealing the Townshend Acts to get on better terms with the American colonists. And he not only talks Parliament into repealing the Townshend Acts, they also let the Quartering Act of 1765 expire. So they really are getting rid of 2 acts that the colonists did not like. So in 1770, the British Parliament, under the advice of Lord Frederick North, repealed the Townshend Acts and also allowed the Quartering Act of 1765 to expire. Now, what was the real reason they repealed the Townshend Acts? Come on, kiddos. What's the magic words?
They were being hounded by the merchants.
No? Yeah, but what's the magic words? Non-importation agreements. Again, the British merchants were getting killed, almost bankrupt over the latest non-importation agreements that were signed by the colonial merchants. And in agreement to repeal the Townshend Acts, what did those American merchants agree to do? Withdraw the non-importation agreements. Now, this is kind of interesting. From 1770 to June 9th of 1772, the American colonists and Great Britain actually got along without much conflict. okay, from 1770, from the repeal of the Townshend Acts to June 9th of 1772, almost 3 years, the American colonists and Great Britain actually get along without much hassle. But something happens on June 9th of 1772, which is our next subtopic that will start tomorrow, that's going to increase hostility again between the two units. Yep.
What were the dates?
Okay, so from 1770, when they repealed Townshend Acts, to June 9th, 1772, almost that 3-year period, there were really no conflicts or uneasy feelings between the American colonists and Great Britain. Unfortunately, on June 9th of 1772, a conflict is going to occur between the colonists and Great Britain that's going to re-fire that argumentative attitude between the two sides. That will eventually lead us to what? Revolutionary War. Okay? So we'll finish that up tomorrow.